Life Biosciences CEO Jerry McLaughlin joined us last fall for episode 166 of the Business of Biotech, an episode that did a pretty good job of digging into the dynamics of age-related disease and that entire space. What we didn't do on that episode was dig into the business mechanics of Life's outsourced manufacturing relationship. The company's lead candidate is a partial epigenetic reprogramming therapy that it's prepping for a 2025 IND and optic neuropathies. And it's pretty complex work, as is often the case with ATMP development. Not just any CDMO will do. That is, if any CDMO will do. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech. And on this episode, Jerry is back, and he brought a friend to help give us a look under the hood of Life Biosciences' relationship with its outsourced manufacturing partner. That friend is the recently anointed president and CEO of Forge Biologics, John Maslowski. Forge is a CDMO that got into the cell and gene therapy outsourcing game early and has grown quickly as that space has blossomed. And John, who likely needs no introduction to folks in the CGT sector, has served the C-suite there since 2021, but just took the captain's chair in October of this year. He's on the board at ARM and Life Science Cares, and his bio chops span companies big and small, including Wyeth, Merck, Teva, FibroCell, Castle Creek, and more. Jerry, welcome back, and John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me back, too. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I'm thrilled to have you guys on, and I want to start with Jerry. Before we get into the dynamics of the relationship between Forge and Life, I want to start with Jerry because, like I said, you were on most recently, just about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and I love having repeat guests. Oftentimes it's the span is considerably more than a year. So by the time I catch up with someone who's been on the show before, there's 2 or 3 years worth of progress to talk about. In this case, it's been just about a year, but I thought maybe you could give us a little update perhaps on what's happening at Life since, I think it was October of last year, and what's kind of exciting you about the progress going on there.
Yeah, Matt, happy to do it. Believe it or not, in a year's time, we've had a lot of progress and a lot of exciting things. And as you mentioned in your opening, we are on the precipice of entering the clinic, right? Filing an IND. It's here now. It's nearly upon us in mid-2025, and we expect to be the first in the partial epigenetic reprogramming space to enter the clinic. And as you mentioned, for 2 optic neuropathies. And so what we've been doing since we last talked, I think when we last talked, we had initial data from a non-human primate study in a NION model, which NION's basically a stroke in the back of the eye where you have damage to the retinal ganglion cells. And that was fantastic data that really elevated us out of the mouse world, right? A lot of great data in mice, but making that transition to an eye structure that reflects that of the human and being able to get across an interlimiting membrane and demonstrate expression of our therapy, which we call ER100, but we're delivering 3 transcription factors, OSK. And so that was fantastic. But in the year's time since then, we've really made good progress, which we'll hear about today in manufacturing, as well as we've replicated the non-human primate study, which we're building this company on rigor in science. And we thought it was a great step forward to move out of the mouse models into non-human primates, but then to replicate the data and show further expansion and support of restoration of visual function and preservation of retinal ganglion cells was really compelling. And we think it really puts us in a confident position going forward to IND. Where we are right now is we're right in the middle of IND enabling package. And things are going well there. But on top of that, it's been a big year from an organization standpoint. And I think it's important to mention, you keep your head down, you do good work, and you hope maybe someday you'll get recognized. And this was our year. I think we're starting to, folks are starting to take notice. In March, we were recognized as one of the 12 hottest biotechs in the Boston area. And just to give you an idea, there's over 1,000 biotechs in the greater Boston area. So it was a pretty good recognition.
Yeah, I was going to say, it'd be quite a different story if you were one of the hottest 12 biotechs in Omaha. But that's
in Omaha, yeah, for sure. And then we earned a Great Place to Work certification in 2024 and 25. And what you have here, it's really the most definitive recognition as an employer of choice. And each year you have over 10,000 companies from 60 plus countries apply, and only about 1% to 2% qualify. And it's a really good certification. A lot of employees, prospective employees, look for that certification as a company that would be high on their list. And then most recently in October, we were one of 6 companies, including the Bostino Fire Award winners. And this award recognizes companies in the Boston area, not only for innovation in science, but also how we support the local community and the innovation ecosystem. So that's just as important to us, how we serve our community. And so that's been a big year for us as an organization, and we're proud of the employees we have here, our Life family. We're small now, but we will looking to grow into the future. And then most recently, we presented some additional data from our non-human primate study, our second study, and it expanded upon the data from previous, but also reinforced in this replication of the data. And it was presented at the American Academy of Ophthalmology, which is the largest, eye physician group in the world, and the largest meeting in the world. And in the post mortem of the meeting, Ophthalmology Times put out a top 10 takeaways. And our program, partial epigenetic reprogramming and ER100 specifically, was listed as the number 2 takeaway from this year's meeting. Really innovative. They're really looking particularly in glaucoma, looking beyond IOP lowering and looking at therapeutics that have the potential to reverse disease and restore retinal ganglion cells. Because we know that even when you lower IOP effectively, glaucoma, the disease itself continues to move forward. So big year for us, and bigger year to come in 2025.
Yeah, sounds like some great momentum heading into IND in the clinic. Like I said, I've had conversations, 3 years spread with CEOs who had less to report than you just did. So congratulations. Take a break, take a rest. The holidays are coming. Take some time off if you need to. John, I want to turn to you. And I think I think I know the most exciting thing going on in your life right now. You're a couple months into the CEO's chair at Forge. If there's more exciting stuff going on, certainly share that with us. But I thought that'd be a nice segue into sort of how that transition unfolded.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited and honored to be taking over this wonderful team at Forge. We've had this great partnership now for nearly a year with Ajinomoto after our acquisition. Mm-hmm. And, Tim Miller, who was our leader through the acquisition, through the birth and growth of Forge, decided for his career to go on and do new things. And we thank him for all of his entrepreneurship and leadership through the transition. But, very, lucky for me. And as I mentioned, honored to be asked by Ajinomoto to take over the helm and see this transition as we're now really positioning Forge going into more later stage production, more commercial minded discussions with some of our clients, and working with really great new technologies like Jerry and Sharon and Michelle and his teams, CMC needs on their program that you just discussed. So, great transition for me, really set up well with the team here. What I've noticed, though, maybe to give a quick update on Forge, is just seeing tremendous growth in the organization. And I think in areas where you want your CDMOs to grow, right? We're seeing expansions in our, in all of our technical operations groups, MS&T, our quality units are pacing properly with those. Meanwhile, they're still growing our systems as we are graduating now into more of a commercially minded support system. So a lot of that growth over the last year or so with Forge. And looking forward now, it's interesting, we talk in biotech about I have cash for a year, or I got a year or couple of years of runway, and here's my plan. Now working under, the umbrella of a much larger organization under Japan, we talk about the 2030 plan now and beyond. So for us, it gives us an opportunity to focus less on, some of the funding and sort of banking side of the business, and really concentrate on what's really our master site plan, what's our execution plan over the course of the next, nearly a decade of gene therapy growth, as we all foresee the future really blossoming into more commercial products. And really, how do we not only treat rare diseases, but broader rare diseases, and now thinking about supplying non-rare diseases. So it's a really, great thought process we have here at Forge, and now with the ability to see down the road a bit and think about things like CapEx investments, in real ways. It's really a wonderful time for us to be thinking about growth and seeing very good traction, through companies now funded and bringing really, really interesting technologies. And we're very lucky as we have the chance to work with them and really help them, move their development along.
Yeah, that's great. And the last time I talked with the CEO of Forge Biologics, it was Tim Miller, and I remember a good portion of our conversation. We kind of hovered on the development and growth happening in Columbus. I'm kind of playing off Jerry's recognition, of Life Biosciences as a hot company in Boston. Not to discredit Columbus, you're not quite the biotech hub that Boston is. But at the time, Jerry and I talked, Columbus is just a few hours away from me. I see the city growing incredibly. Give us an update on the Columbus kind of atmosphere and how that's advantageous to, does it remain advantageous to Forge being in the Columbus area?
It's a great question. One I asked when I first joined Forge coming from Philadelphia,
Yeah.
sort of advanced therapy hotbed along with the West Coast and Boston. And the question of talent and growth and everything in the area. Well, Nationwide Hospital, there's the birthplace of a lot of the original gene therapies that are now commercial, including, Invexus and Sarepta's products. And luckily I have a lot of team members here who come from those backgrounds and organizations. Not only is the city one of the fastest growing in the U.S., the life science, I'm very impressed with the life science presence here. More companies emerging, technologies, universities, quite frankly, putting out a lot of scientific majors that we've been very lucky to bring and seed our GMP and a lot of our process analytical development groups. So, I as it's a newer developing area, we do see technical talent. We see really wonderful growth, reasonable costs for building, is really an important part to remember, and a hub here that we can ship to, most. We do international shipments and U.S. shipments within a lot of very reasonable time frame. So for us, it's really became a very advantageous central area for us to concentrate our organization on, even though we have a global presence with our commercial sales force and other parts of our business. But really excited to see how the next years really grow the talent pool in the area in a way that groups like BioOhio are all contributing to that. So
Yeah, very cool. Good deal. Jerry, I want to turn back to you, and we'll start talking about the origins of the relationship between Life Biosciences and Forge. But before there was even Forge necessarily on your radar, Jerry, you talk about the momentum going on at Life Biosciences. At what point in that momentum, I think my notes say the partnership with Forge was came together, last spring. So prior to last spring, as you were contemplating the outsourced manufacturing space and your next move there, what was the, catalyst for that?
Yeah. So it was when we moved from the mouse models into the non-human primate data, and when we were able to demonstrate expression in the retinal ganglion cells and restoration of visual function in the non-human primate model, where we were able to deliver our therapeutic across the inner limiting membrane intravitreally and then crossing through the inner membrane. With that positive results, we had prepped, we went to the board, and we made that decision. And it's not something we, as a small company, particularly in gene therapy, it is the most significant spend to date in the history of the company, and a major use of our remaining resources. So we needed confidence, and we staged sort of that as a key milestone and a trigger to set up the agreement, which ultimately was with Forge. But we had started the process well over a year prior.
Yeah. And what did that process look like? I mean, I don't expect you to go through it line by line.
No.
But what were the criteria that you were looking for? And then
I think it's criteria and then process. I think process is really important. Mm-hmm. And it's something I think as a small company, particularly when we're short-staffed, we own a company of 12 people. Sometimes the oversight on this process, but it's so important for the company. We don't pick the right partner, we're in trouble. So really, we look at team, and by team we mean the technical expertise and the history of those involved, knowing who will be involved, knowing their commitment to our program, and that's sort of a sense you have to get through repeated interactions and doing site visits and having meetings and having calls. And reviewing, and ultimately it's sort of an informed gut feel at the end. And then, are they eager to succeed? Are you just another customer, a number, or are you critically important to their business? And as a small company, we are our ER100, our lead program, is critical to our life as a company. And is it going to be as important to your partner? And a lot of folks can talk about that, but do they deliver in the end? And that's critically important. One and two, can they meet timelines? We look at history of the company, and so in the case of Forge, we have to do a proxy for that. It's a history and the proven capabilities of the leadership team there. And we did our diligence on everyone there. And what we liked, in this case, just to cut to the chase on Forge, was we liked the fact that a guy like John not only had manufacturing expertise, but was an operator. And several others in their leadership team, whether it was from a regulatory standpoint or building out the facility. They had a long history of building and working in facilities. And so that gave us a lot of confidence, and they had a vision. These were folks just like us. Most of our management team, we've worked for 20 or 25 years in the industry, but we came to Life Biosciences because we had a shared vision of how we can change the world through HealthSpan, right? And so we saw the similar thing at Forge. So there's that connection as well, a shared vision, a shared mission. In the process of what we did, we started out with 10 or 12. Our senior vice president of CMC, which John had mentioned, Michel Wattier, he put a ton of work over months, interrogating, assessing technical expertise of 10 or 12 potential CROs. We actually had informal bids sent in from those and work plans. We then, through an arduous process, including bringing in, which I applaud for him, he brought in an outside consulting firm, consultants who worked in the gene therapy space for a long, long time to help evaluate each of these and identify where we may be missing things, right? They have a good understanding of the CROs, all their strengths and weaknesses. And so that helped us streamline and sort of put the process on a level playing field. Over time, we took that down to 6, and then we took it down to 3 for the more formal assessment, which involved site visits, not only by our CMC team, but I went on those site visits as well. And we had a chance to further evaluate the teams. And then getting final bids. Over time, those bids get more granular and more specific. You learn a lot in those interactions, and ultimately we made the decision that Forge was the most optimal partner for us from their focus, their vision, their capabilities, our needs, and what they could provide.
Yeah. On the capabilities note, I'm just curious for some perspective on this. Yep. It occurs to me that if you're the CEO of a company that's looking to take an antibody to IND and into the clinic, and you need an outsourcing partner, and you start with a list, you start with a list of 12, antibodies, ADCs, vaccines, you're probably going to start with a much bigger list because there are far more outsourced manufacturers out there working on those traditional biologics. And perhaps your winnowing down of that list is going to be a long and arduous process because you're looking for nuance. Like everybody can manufacture an antibody. In the gene therapy space, the requirements are far more unique and selective and complex. How did that impact that winnowing down process for you from did you quickly go from 12 to 6 because you just realized hey, these first 6 we looked at or these 6 that we looked at simply don't have the technical capability to do what we do?
That's right. That was the easy part, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's good to start broad. You learn a lot about what's out, what offerings there are, and whether there may be gaps in your thinking along the way. And you ask better questions of the other CROs. So we quickly were able to bring it down from 12 to 6. Plus, there's not a time to have a fulsome process, and it's not fair to the CRO. So we quickly were able to narrow it down to 6, largely based on technical expertise and just a feel of fit. You'd be amazed how sometimes you're just not a priority on someone's list, and that gives you a pretty big answer. And then from there, it got a little more serious, spending a lot more time, starting to involve others in the group, expanding just beyond the SVP of CMC, but also our CSO, and then bringing even in the executive team to pressure test the capabilities, just from a generalist perspective as well, and a business relationship. And that took us down to 3, and then ultimately we were able to make the decision. Right, so that happened that process was well over a year from start to finish.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question on that process. I promise I'll get to you, John. We'll get back to you.
Let Jerry tell the story. Good
Yeah.
one.
Well, and this is, this one, it's a little bit more esoteric, right? You talked about, determining that there was a fit that could see things through, right? That was going to give you the time, the attention, going to treat you like you're the most important molecule in their four walls. To your point, I mean, that's, it's easy to deliver lip service on that kind of thing. How do you vet that and sort of quantify it, not just qualify it? Like, yeah, I really like those guys. They're making a lot of promises that sound good to me.
Matt, I've been doing this for 35 years.
Yeah.
So John and I didn't know each other per se. Maybe we had met once or twice, but we have a lot of close friends in common. And also one of our scientists worked with one of their senior executives at a gene therapy company. We were able to, when we got down to the small list, we vet the management team too, particularly in the case of Forge. They were a new entity. They were a little bit of an unknown. Mm-hmm. We vetted the individuals separately from our interactions. I'll just be honest, that's what we do. I think
that's exactly what I was looking for. I mean, that's the valuable insight I'm looking for, right?
I mean, I just can't operate otherwise, right? I think that's incumbent upon us. Particularly, you have a choice there, right? Do you go with tried and true, or do you go with IBM, or do you go with Apple? And for us, Apple was the future, and we were able to get very comfortable with their integrity, their track record of success, and I think their ability, because several of them, including John, had worked in nascent biotechs, where we have to be flexible, we need great support, right? We don't have armies of people, and so we're going to rely on them as everyone says partner. But it's a partner in the foxhole because this is complicated stuff here, gene therapy. We're getting better at it and more predictable and higher confidence, and we'll get there. But you run into problems along the way. There's always challenges along the way, and we needed to know that the team on the other side was going to be there for us. And that's not only their background and where they come from, so they understand, but then building personal relationships. And there are simple things that you would be surprised. The business development team in Forge was just responsive to every question, every need in a timely fashion. That makes a difference for a small company because it's a window into the soul of the company.
Yeah.
Right. Before you're working primarily with BD. And then I'll tell you, when I went on a site visit, you're not only meeting with the team in the room, but I like to go into, John probably knows, but I kind of moseyed over to the break room, get a cup of coffee, and just see the interactions among folks over lunch and in the break room, right? What their attitude is and how they're operating. And I got to tell you, it's a high end. And we did our research on Columbus as well, because we had the same question: what's Columbus? Yeah, Columbus was known for financial services and insurance, right?
Yeah, in my household, it's known as a place my wife likes to go to shop.
Yeah, exactly, shopping. But it's amazing with Ohio State, Case Western, other universities, Cincinnati, with Cincinnati Children's. The sourcing for technical and STEM is amazing. I mean, John probably could give statistics of how many people they have apply for their internships and for their jobs. It's unbelievable, and it's a great place to live, right? So we got very comfortable with it that they had the technical expertise and the right mindset and right attitude. So it was a really nice fit for us in the end. Yeah, are you going to take a little bit of chance going with the new kid on the block? But they're no longer that now. I think we picked right in terms of their success and their growth.
Yeah, very good. John, I'm going to give you, I want to ask you a question, but I want you to guard yourself from becoming, a chief commercial officer at Forge Biologics in your response.
Do my best.
Yeah. So Jerry referenced BD sort of being the tip of the spear, the initial interface with a sponsor company. I've never worked for an outsourced biopharmaceutical manufacturer, but I've worked in plenty of environments with BD teams who overpromised on capabilities and then left ops holding the bag, so to speak. And I've covered this space. I haven't covered it for a long, long time, but I've covered it long enough to see that happen among in the outsourced manufacturing community. So the question I want to ask you is how, and I mean, like, I'd like you to answer this as objectively as possible. How do you guard against that in your role, your management team? How do you guard against Because a lot of this stuff we're seeing for the first time, folks, and it's easy to say, yeah, we'll take that challenge, and then turn around and go, wow, we signed up for something we can't deliver on. So how do you guard against that?
Well, it's a great question. And Matt, Jerry said this very well on the other side. Forge's management team has been on the other side of this. We all were drug developers coming into this role. And I think one thing that attracted me to Forge coming from developing cell therapies for rare skin diseases, really was, can we build a CDMO that avoids the things we didn't like about working with CDMOs? One of which is exactly what you're talking about, is transparency, right? And I think it's very easy when you have a dedicated BD team that's really pushing hard, and I think they do it from a right part of their heart, to go out and really try to sell the wares of the organization. But I think we tried to set it up, and also being in the role of chief commercial officer previously, in a little bit of a different way. And it really is to make sure that we're very tightly connected to the technical side of our organization. What are our true capabilities at this point in time? And what do we honestly think we could be doing? Because sometimes these programs can be a year plus long as you're moving through development. Where will it be that? And making sure we're very clearly communicating that with the client. So, over-promising never buys you anything. And I've heard it plenty of times on the other side of the bench. And I think clients appreciate when you can be like, Forge is actually not prepared to do these particular things. Here's our plans to get there. Does that fit your needs? Now, here's an actual tangible thing we've done to try to manage this. So we've taken a little bit of a different approach when it comes to our sales force. So we do have, what we call it client development, which is, I think, more along the lines of a BD rep. But they're paired almost like in drug sales with a technical sales advisor. So really what this is now a technical sales expert, which is usually a team of AV scientists. We have PhDs. It almost reminds me of sort of like, like a sales sort of like medical liaison, right? Where they are paired with the sales rep to give the technical sort of readout, collection of information, collect the needs of the client, so we can marry the sales and operate in commercial side of our business a lot better with the technical side. Now, I don't want every scientist in the lab on every sales call, right? They need to be doing work in developing programs and PD and AD work. So we actually have a dedicated team that does that to connect what we're capable of now to where we are in the future. And they can speak the language of the client just as well. It's really, have that technical capability, translate that right up the sales and the proposals so they're clear of where we are now and what we can do. And then when we run through the relationship, once we're now a partner and they have a client relations rep, they continue the process to help translate things, challenges in manufacturing or new steps we're about to take, stage gate moving into, say, GMP from PD, and they can help partner and make sure that communication is clear. Because I think really what the biggest challenge is, if you lose a step or there's a whisper down the lane somewhere away there, you can lose the client's sort of trust if all of a sudden the message is wrong coming through. So we put some safeguards in place to try to prevent that.
Yeah. All right, very good. I appreciate your objectivity and concrete examples in that response. Thank you, John. Jerry, I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of what Forge is doing for you. And I'm not even sure what the best way to go about posing this question is to you, but from what I understand, Forge is going to be supporting Life Bio's AAV process development, toxicology, CMGP manufacturing, and analytical services. So the way I frame it up is like, I just put it on your plate, Jerry, to tell me what considerations went into each of those four specific areas in your analysis of Forge's capabilities.
So a little bit about the technical expertise, those will be working, and the talent in the room, right, or in the building. And I think one of the things, and so we look at that in every company, right? And then the facility itself. If you haven't been there, you should really go visit their facility. I think it's, as John was saying, and I'm not just saying it, but it's quite impressive. I think it was their collective learning of what they didn't like about a facility, from how you enter a room, how, if something breaks down, you can fix it from the roof. If you want to keep a sterile room, you can put material in a lockbox that's separated from one room to the next, so you don't lose time. There's a lot of really interesting things from a facility standpoint. So that matters to us. And so the other thing that I think was a real attractive piece for Forge when we were looking at this versus others was they have their own therapeutic and development. And so they were making, I assume they were making lots of learnings. We say mistakes, lots of learnings along the way that we'll benefit from. And so that was it. That was intriguing to us and very interesting that they were paving the way and putting their own money behind their own process, right? Mm-hmm. And they have their own therapeutic and development. So that made a difference from a toxicology standpoint to us, and so the other processes. And then from a scale up, they are now, and boy, when we first started talking to you, it was not even where it is today, but 500 liter, they were able to go to 500 liter and pretty soon. I think John, you're now 5,000, right? So we could take it, and we have, as you were saying earlier, we have for our optic neuropathy candidate ER100, we have a narrow base NION, which is a stroke in the back of the eye, small numbers, but primary open-angle glaucoma is a large population that we think we can help. And so we're going to need scale eventually when we transition to commercial manufacturing. And the hope is we want to be able to stay in the same facility. So that's another thing. And then also they started with more than one suite. There are CROs with only one suite. Something goes down, you're out of luck. Your timelines are shot. And for us, an executive in a biotech firm, time is my biggest enemy. Time is our cost of capital is so high as an small biotech that we really time kills. And so they had 3 suites, and I think you're in excess of 15 now, John, at this point.
Yeah, we have 20 operational.
20 now. Yeah. And so that really was another thing we looked at. And then the other, finally, and this was it gets back to, once again, I think having their own therapeutic. Early on, they had their own methods internally. They outsource very few things, very few items, and it's certain micro that you would want to outsource anyway because you don't want to contaminate the facility. So they had their own methods in place, which is another advantage, right? So as we looked, and as I get back to, once again, Matt, they were small, we were small in our own worlds, and it was a perfect fit at our stage and where we were headed and where they were going. And so we've been able to watch them grow, and as we advance, and we like to think we get the early mover attention now because we're one of the early folks to go in,
right? And
that's important to us as well. So we had a chance to build strong relationships before they got to where they are today.
Yeah, very good. Well, I do want to see it, Jerry. You started this response out by saying you got to go down and check it out. I haven't seen it firsthand. I've had plenty of interaction with execs and folks from Forge. John, I mean, you're in Philly. I'm assuming you probably, when you go out to Columbus, you probably take a short flight over there. But if you ever drive, I live about halfway between Erie and Pittsburgh, so you drive right by my house on your way there. Just pick me up. We'll go out and have a look.
I'm happy to grab you and come out for a tour.
Yeah,
I'm here every week.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
I like to dig into sort of the finer points around contract negotiation for the benefit of our listeners, our audience who, perhaps haven't engaged an outsourced manufacturing partner just yet. We have a lot of folks who are, R&D, preclinical companies who are going to be traveling down this road. So let's talk about that for a little bit. When it came down, Jerry, post vetting process, we're dialed in. We like what Forge has got going on. We know they're capable. Now let's start hammering out some details in terms of what they're going to do for us and what we need them to do for us that perhaps they haven't seen before. What goes into that process for you, Jerry, in terms of, I guess, the execution, not the execution, but the forging, if you will, of the contract?
Yeah. I mean, we find this, so it's not too dissimilar to a CRO. We're going through that process now, and you get wide ranges of pricing for the same activity and outcome. Mm-hmm. And then it's a matter of it's vetting through that process, right? And we not only had our internal experience, but we relied, as I mentioned earlier, we brought in some independent consultants who had good pattern recognition on costs and variability and trends and habits of certain CDMOs in terms of how they charge, how they not hid costs, but where the hidden costs were. So we as we whittled it down, we had a good idea of the range from a negotiation from a cost standpoint. And then we also, it's not just negotiating price, but it's negotiating what's involved in services and along the way. And so we were able to continue to refine that. I think I mentioned that earlier, refine the statement of work, but also refine the contract. along the way. So we became confident that we were within a reasonable range. At the end of the day, because at the end of the day, price is not the final decision, because we could get the cheap, if we went with the cheapest and it didn't work, we'd be out of business. So I think from a pricing standpoint, we were able to get there, and from a work included and detail, we were able to get pretty much what we needed. Of course, there'll always be changes later. I'm sure we've made a number of changes to the work since then. Yeah. So that was a good thing. And then frankly, Forge was young and hungry, and they in a good way, they were aggressive, and we sort of, I can say that now, and John knows it. We sort of leveraged that to get a better deal. We were this poor little biotech company with a really cool, innovative technology. Wouldn't it be great if Forge, if you manufactured our product for us? And so I think we were able to trim the edges a little bit there.
The salesman being sold.
Right.
John, what's your appetite for and Jerry, maybe you can weigh in on this too, and speak to any, I don't know if you want to call them customization requests or proprietary requirements that, like I said, perhaps aren't cookie cutter like you'd see in a traditional biologics manufacturing agreement. So one, were there any sort of special requirements going into the engagement that John and his team had to mull over whether they could meet?
John, you want to take that? Because I'm
happy to, Jerry. And maybe there's a broader statement to this too, is I think, Jerry said it best, as we're an emerging CDMO, and there are a lot of them, right? We know there is a lot of good talent out there, a lot of great organizations to choose from. Where I think though, where some of the larger ones especially tend to get caught up is the formality of the deal making business. And I think where we get lost and where we can lose good technologies is rigidity this early on. I think, the way Jerry said it, we were very hungry to have great technologies with good management teams come in, and really to have high, probability of success moving into IND. We really looked at these constructs very carefully, and trying to give advice early on, hey, sequencing looks a little off in these particular sections. If we're asked to do that, we're happy to do consulting up front if it means, the ability to get to work with these clients. So, in Life's case and others, we have good optionality for flexibility on multiple fronts. And obviously there's a business to run, so we have to maintain certain margins and cover costs. But, we took a tack, Matt, where we're, not only we try to be very transparent, we include pass-through costs in our numbers. We don't charge specific management fees and things that don't look like real charge items. Those are things we didn't care about, when we worked with CDMOs in the past. Or there's small fine print to add 40% because of pass-throughs. We want to make sure, one, the pricing is very transparent, so it's straight through. And we absolutely negotiate, on the front end, especially with our early partners, about terms and things like that, just because we think we want a good science through the shop, and why don't we get them there? And if you get a number of those heading into late stage and then potential commercial, you show them a good relationship, you're all under one roof. I want then Jerry to bring his next program to me, right? So a lot of gene therapy companies work on a platform, right? And so if I have multiple products that are running the same manufacturing process with a different gene of interest, that's less quality work because the batch records are the same and the release criteria is similar. The PPQ runs at the end of this are very straightforward. The CQAs during the process. So it's more repeatable work for us that we can deliver on really precisely. But it's really opening the gate to that later, larger opportunity that we really thought about at Forge. So, for us, that means that there's some flexibility on front where we can stay on top of, the margins. I think that's the best way that we create relationships early and grow the business. And it's been successful. Frankly, we just, moving through our 50th client now that we've just picked up recently, and, really able to grow the business base because of that philosophy. So, this deal and others, try to work with the client, find the best outcomes, perform DOE studies, try different opportunities. We can do, assays developments, things that aren't on a typical platform only approach. These are example things that we can do to a la carte to help the development process along on top of the original, negotiation work we do.
Right. Yeah. Jerry, what's your best advice, like I said, for folks who are in your position on your org chart but haven't done this before?
Yeah. So I think it's one, you have to have an outstanding internal head of CMC, and we have one, Michel Wattier. He's been doing it for 20 years, gene therapy and other areas. He knows his stuff. That said, I would highly advise bringing in outside consultants to help you run the process internally, because when you're in a small biotech, that's time away from the day-to-day operation, and it's worth a little bit of investment to help run a more fulsome process. I think we owe it to our investors. I think we owe it to the board and the company and the success of the project to run a fulsome process and learn and go through that. It's a little extra work up front, but when you start with that, as we started out 12 to 15 months ahead of time and whittle down, we had a high degree of confidence. And when it was time to pull the trigger on the milestone event, as I talked about earlier, we knew it was Forge we wanted to work with. And it was just a matter of finalizing the contract. And so we had little wasted time in the end because we had a lot of confidence in our decision. So I think that's something, if I'm speaking to other CEOs or other execs or other heads of CMC, don't be afraid to bring someone in to help in the process. It's worth every dollar spent. When you're talking about an investment for us that was a substantial proportion of our remaining cash, right? To go out and invest in the manufacturing. So that's my biggest advice. And then I would say also, really understand, one of the larger CDMOs may be the right place for certain companies, but understand what your culture, your internal talent, and how that matches up with your potential partner. One final thing we didn't talk about, but I think is important, and I think too often, and this is something, just self-reflect on companies and how to keep yourselves accountable. We always want to push and, not blame, but hold the CDMO or the CRO accountable. But there's also internal processes within your own company that if you're not communicating with the CDMO, how do you expect them to fully help you and solve problems? So I think we have a great team that takes that very seriously. If something happens, I had a discussion with our senior VP of CMC today, and I said, what do you really like? What are the one or two best things about working with Forge? And he said, it's a true partnership. And he said, the project manager's top notch. And that's where it falls down. If you don't have the senior exec within your company having a open and honest relationship with the project manager on the other side, everything breaks down, right? Everything breaks down, because typically problems aren't with people in the day-to-day operation. It's typically process and relationship and communication at a higher level. So that's the next thing that has to happen. And that's accountability on both sides of the equation. Yeah, I think that's where sometimes small companies like mine, they make a mistake, and you're so busy day to day and you're limited staff that you forget about those important parts of what a partnership. It's a two-way partnership, not a one-way partnership.
Right. And I've got a couple questions for you on the partnership angle and what that looks like, from a day-to-day execution standpoint. But before I go there, you made an interesting point, Jerry, and I might be making this up in my head, but it seems to me. So you said, hey, this is a significant portion of the remaining cash that we have at this stage in our company that we're going to spend. We're going to spend money on Forge. Is there sort of an inflection when you sign on with a CDMO? Obviously, you do that at a very important stage in your company when there's some confidence that you've got something that's manufacturable, clearly. Is there an inflection or like a nuance there, like where when you spend that money, it might be a catalyst to bringing in more money? Does it have an impact? Like, does this decision have any impact on your investment community, on the capital that you raise next?
Well, I think it does. Even though it's not bringing you to like a clinical endpoint, value inflection point. One, it demonstrates, because you wouldn't start the manufacturing unless you were financed to cover your day-to-day clinical development operations, but also your non-clinical development operations plus your manufacturing. But I think it gives confidence to future investors that they're going to walk into a situation where they have material for preclinical and phase 1, right? Mm-hmm. That they're not having to make that investment. So that's risk. It's both from a cost and time perspective, but also from a development risk perspective, that when they come in, that is all taken off the table. Yeah. And so that's how we've positioned it. And I think it's, if I look at risks in biotech companies, time, money, and execution, and that takes something major off the table, particularly in gene therapy. Right? This is not simple manufacturing.
Yep.
Yeah, Matt, maybe just to add to Jerry's point, it's not uncommon for us to be on with our clients' investors. I think CMC, as they know, being one of the biggest challenges in advanced therapies, in gene therapy notably, they want to feel confident that we're a good partner and that we know what we're doing, and also some of our historical experiences. So it's an interesting point Jerry makes, although we always talk about, sort of non-clin endpoints and clinical endpoints and trial designs and enrollment rates. I think they recognize, especially in this field, CMC needs to be well buttoned up with, regulatory vetting for us to make a substantial investment. So not an uncommon ask, even at the CDMO front.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad there was some substance to those answers, because I didn't know if that question made any sense at all.
No.
So the partnership thing, what is that? Jerry touched on it, right? Like he said, like, he asked his CMC director, what's important here, and he said the partnership, and you got a top-notch project manager. What does that look like on the day-to-day for your head of CMC, Jerry, and for your team that's working, John, your team that's working on Jerry's project? How accessible are they to one another? Are the doors open? Can Jerry and his head of CMC, stop in? Jerry already told us that he likes to snoop around your break room and observe your employees going about their business.
You didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't blame you one bit.
But they get a badge.
Yeah.
But what is that like? What's acceptable in terms of transparency and access to what's going on at Forge?
Yeah, and I think it's an important relationship builder. Every CDMO has different rules. Some are very stringent, and some are very more collaborative. We tend to be more on the collaborative side. So there's certain levels of ways we work at Forge. Everyone is assigned what we call a client relations partner, who is the project manager that Jerry is referring to. They're also assigned an internal PMO. So we actually have an internal project manager who sort of manages the project internally. We have someone who's the liaison with the client. And then they work collectively to make sure we have consistent and frequent communications. What I believe in the case of Life, there's a weekly call where they, keep up, especially in times of heightened manufacturing or development. They may change cadence times depending on different parts of the development, but we try to make sure that we're having regular communications, transparent communications. So if there is an issue, we need them to know right away, and then we can work through the problem together. One of the worst things you can do as an organization is to go off and try to figure it out and then go tell the client, right? That creates just a distrust that nobody wants to manage through, and it changes the tone of the relationship. So we make sure we try to do that, quite openly. We do have a fairly, I think, liberal PIP program, which is a person in plant. We do encourage our clients to be here during major operations and view the process. We have angles you can actually watch visually. There's camera angles, like we have, and closed circuit cameras to watch. But it gives them the ability then to observe and see us in action, how we work, ask questions, and sort of be there when we're live during sort of very critical parts of the process. I get that. Like being a CEO of a small biotech before this, you really want to be close to where your critical risk points are. So, we obviously make sure we can give that option to clients to be able to do that. And then we try to meet on routine JSCs. I think that's where decisions can be made. It's a bit more formal of the meeting, formalize the communication of data updates, next steps, how we were working together, feedback for Forge, the things you like to see done better. That's a great place for me and the CTO and the CRO to really sit and listen and hear about how the relationship is growing, or if there are really good things, take that learning and use it in other clients. So it's a great way for us to learn more about interactions with our trusted partners that come in. So that's the format, Matt, how we try to work with clients and try to maintain that. As I mentioned, it can sort of evolve over the course. If they're in the middle of their trial and they're dosing patients and we're really not on the hot plate for the moment, we may meet on a little less regular basis, but we do keep in touch during those times as well. Make sure we're just fulfilling the needs of the program. And then we also use those opportunities to ask, do you have a next program? And if you're interested in working with Forge again, let's start some pre-planning there, because you know how it is. Queues can be long sometimes. There could be some opportunities. So we like to get ahead of those and try to make sure we're meeting their needs for timing and their boards and their investors' needs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Jerry, anything to add there?
No, I just, because I've been part of the joint committees, and what's nice, it is more formal, and you're giving project updates. And so in addition to our SVP of CMC, we have, our CSO, our Chief Scientific Officer there, and myself as the CEO. So it's a business update, it's a process update. And what's nice, even in those situations, right? I think the last time we were there, we were able to identify a challenge, right? That was on the table. And it just, organically turns into a brainstorming session. Or, our chief scientific officers, good, very, very good at problem solving, right? And before you know it, she and John were having a discussion. And I think within, a day we saw that ended up not being much at all, right? So, because you're constantly running into, this is the nature of our business in biotech, whether it's clinical development, whether it's HR, or whether it's manufacturing, it's constant, it's constant speed bumps and questions and challenges that we have to solve. And, you build a better relationship that way. So I think that's I'm not sure that's only Forge doing that, but I think it's an important part of the process. And if I were to speak to other execs, it's important that you invest the time and energy to build those relationships and keep yourself involved at that level.
That like you gave that specific challenge example is the ability to come together and tackle a challenge. We'll continue using the word challenge and not call it a problem. In a client contractor relationship, you can easily call things problems. Is the approach to addressing challenges inherently baked into the fact that we're in a scientific industry and everyone wants to collaboratively and civilly solve scientific problems? Or is there more to that story? Like, is it just baked into your head of CMC and your chief scientific officer, Jerry? They just know that they're going to see things over there at Forge that confound them. And we're going to have to get together and figure them out. We're not going to get mad about it. We're not going to be displeased with our service. We're not going to be displeased with their, subject matter expertise. We're going to solve the problem because we're scientists, and that's what we do.
I will say this, Matt, and I'll turn it over to John. I would get nervous if we don't see challenges in our day-to-day operation. Right. If a week goes by and we don't have some issue that comes to the forefront, whether it's in manufacturing or in clinical development or an assay or you name it, right? It would be surprising to me. That's the nature of our job. Keep making forward progress by solving problems along the way. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's expected. I think you nailed it. It's the nature of our business where we have hypotheses around science and technology, and we're moving them along in the process. So it's constantly an examination of and examination of the business, and also looking at potential speed bumps along the way.
Yeah, I'll add to Matt. It's why I mentioned to connect quickly and transparently with the client. Those are two more brains on that we get to now access to talk about the challenge. And of course, we make sure we collect the right data so we can have a call and walk through what we found, make sure the data is clear, and engage on a solution. We also like to come with solutions to those meetings. So we usually pretty rapidly meet and say, okay, here are 2 or 3 options that we can do. One might be one path that might take a little longer, but maybe a little more straightforward from a documentation standpoint. One might be quicker, but have to get some reads from the quality unit to see their comfort levels. Generally we always make the right decision for, quality, safety, and that's really, and potency as we're thinking about drugs. But it's best to do those collectively with the client and make sure everyone's on the same page. Luckily, a lot of our clients are very seasoned scientists in the cell and gene therapy space. Now, we do have some clients who don't have that, unfortunately. That's why Jerry's advice for hiring CMC internally is a very good piece of advice for early organizations. Sometimes they're small and they're in their seed rounds and they're looking for some early advice. We try to come with solutions and advice with those as well. And, that's sometimes a little bit more of a challenge, but we always love the luxury of we're actually working with a really great technical team on the other side here. Let's get together and walk through these now, make sure they hear what we're sort of being challenged with, and then use our expertise to try to solve collectively.
Yeah. We're going to run short on time here, guys. You okay for a couple more?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sure.
All right, good. And the next thing I want to ask you about, I hesitate to ask you about. I love to talk about culture, and we've hinted at it. Like we've had, there's been a thread of culture throughout this entire conversation. And I love talking about culture and cultural match and cultural fits. But at the same time, they're hard to it's a hard thing to quantify, right? It's a hard thing to say, well, because we have this tight culture and it works out, like that's why we're gonna save or make money, right? Like it's hard. You can't connect those dots easily. But I do want to stop there for a minute and talk about this because I do think it's important for our listeners again who perhaps are seeing some of this for the first time or about to understand what the value of a good cultural fit is beyond, Jerry thinks John's a pretty fun guy to have a beer with, but he's, not necessarily real good at running an outsourced manufacturing company. So to whatever degree you can, reflecting on the past year working together, can you point to any anecdotes or examples of the value of a good cultural fit? I know it's a hard question to be like, yeah, I can ascribe a specific value to that, but you get what I'm going for.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start, Matt, just a little bit because there's sort of two aspects. One is internal culture in Forge because I can't generate a culture with a client unless I have a good internal culture here. And we over the last 2 years have grown to 370 plus people. So maintaining culture when we were 100 people is a challenge as we grow this side. And interestingly enough, taking over, I started working on some internal culture philosophies around how we actually interact, not only internally, but with clients. So really establishing some new pillars in Forge of what's important to us about how we work together and work with, our clients. And ultimately at the top of these pillars are patients, which is why we're on the call here talking about why these relationships are important, because we ultimately want to help really sick people get better. So in there, we're talking, these pillars have to do with keep my people internally, making sure they're in a great environment where they have growth and well protected, safe environment, but also room for growth in their own careers. And then operational excellence. So clients are actually receiving high quality product in the time they believe that they need them. And moving forward, quality is another pillar. We're really focused on making sure quality mindedness is a big part of our organization. And then clients, because we are in an organization where we have to service our clients and make sure they have the attention and the sort of, part of Forge they need to make sure their products are being moved forward. So that's what I'm using going forward to create this more, operational feeling at Forge as we move into late stage commercial. So then take that back to like working with Jerry and his team, if we can't even communicate properly on a call, we don't have the same values, it sometimes does make a really difficult working situation. And if the client is just ready, wants to move forward and, we're worried about this is not a real world example, but I'll give you for instance, if a client had a program where I felt it was unsafe, that's something that we would have to have that conversation. That might not be the right culture to work with that particular client, right? Yeah. Innovation teams like Jerry's, that's where we all meet together. And I think that's why we have such a good working relationship. Jerry, I hope you don't mind, but I went to one of their quarterly meetings to talk about Forge and introduce it to his staff in Philadelphia. And that's an access for me that I really enjoy. I want them to know I got a chance to listen to their team and watch how they work together. And it's just, that's something that I think creates another level of a relationship. And I think it's really important in our industry, quite frankly, to make sure we're all rowing the boat the same way for helping patients and kids.
Yeah, that's good. I've seldom sort of contemplated the cultural aspect. I spend all my time talking to sponsors, very, very little talking to outsourced manufacturers. I seldom contemplate the fact that you have the right, John, to say, you know what, your culture doesn't fit with this facility, so better go find somebody that does, right? Yeah. Right. Jerry, anything to add?
Well, I think it's so that example of John coming to our company, we pride ourselves and we have an initiative and mission to be a learning organization, whether you're a technical expert or not. And so at we have quarterly all hands meetings where I bring the whole company together for a couple of days, and we always dedicate a meaningful amount of time to learning. And that learning could be an ophthalmologist coming in and talking about glaucoma, could be a gene therapy expert. In this case, we have our legal team, our finance team, the office manager. They know Forge by emails and paperwork, right, and bills, but they don't know John, and they don't know what's under the hood. And we thought it'd be a great idea. And John was very eager and agreed to come and give us a dimension, help them understand further. That forges the relationship, no pun intended, even further. When you have not only our head of CMC and our chief scientific officer and myself, who spend more time with John and his team, but the rest of the organization, they become more invested, they understand. And once again, it's such a critical component to us. So it's part of the organization being learning. And then we have a philosophy, and I'm very fortunate that our senior exec team, and I think it's where, frankly, many folks miss, is treat your quote unquote, we like to say sometimes the industry vendors, but treat your vendors truly not just as partners, but as part of the team. So take the partner out. They are members of the team. Mm-hmm. You invest time and energy in them, and you'll get more back in terms of mind space and share of their energy and commitment than you could ever imagine. And so if you treat the CDMO, the CRO, your other consultants with a lot of respect, and include them in a broader aspect of the company, help them understand more what your challenges are and what your opportunities are. It then, I think, helps them, give more back to the organization. So we probably spend a little more sometimes on consultants in some of these situations, more time. But for us as a small company that's virtual, I can't imagine doing it any other way. It's the only way I think we can operate, have operational excellence. And that's how it works on our end. And I told you, I talk to John from time to time because they've grown very quickly. John, how are you keeping that culture together? We've talked about it. And it's something we keep an eye on, and I'm glad, I know that John is as well. So, but that's always the challenge, right? There was a time when they were not nascent, but they were young and growing, but they've grown so fast now. And that's the challenge he faces, but so far so good.
Yeah. Very good. Well, guys, I'm gonna let you off the hook. I'll tell you, I love these episodes where I have partners on, whether it's outsourcing company and sponsor, or it's a VC and a budding biotech, because they're fun and engaging conversations. Sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant because my audience goes, well, Forge and Life wouldn't get on this podcast together if they weren't going to have a great big love fest. We have to protect from that, right? This was. I'm gonna say this was a transparent and instructive conversation for our audience. I believe it was. I think anybody who listened to this conversation is walking away with some takeaways around, here's some things I should be thinking about as I engage in these discussions and these negotiations and the vetting process. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing some good anecdotes and concrete examples. Good value for the audience.
Great. Well, thank you for having us, Matt. Really appreciate the time. And Jerry, always good to see you.
Always good to see you, John. And Matt, thank you again. I really enjoy the time spent with you.
Me too. We'll do it again. We'll we'll do one in person down at Forge when I take you up on that visit to the facility. We'll do
a walking tour interview. What do you think?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I'll get with Marina and on your PR side, and we'll get that nailed down.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
So that's Life Biosciences CEO Jerry McLaughlin and Forge Biologics President and CEO John Maslowski. I'm Matt Pillar. You just listened to the Business of Biotech. We drop every Monday morning, everywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can watch the videocast, that is, under the Listen and Watch tab at bioprocessonline.com. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Leave us a review and some feedback, and as always, thanks for listening.